And I am now going to start admitting people and mute myself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for your participation in today's event. My name is John Hudak. I'm the Director of Maine's Office of Cannabis Policy, and I'd like to welcome you today for a discussion about batch tracking. An effective inventory track and trace system is critical to the success of a well-regulated system, and we're glad to have such great participation from the industry. We're glad to have such significant interest as well in this legislatively directed effort. Before we segue into the details of batch tracking, there are a few housekeeping items that I'd like to go over. First, everyone should have received an email from OCP with several documents detailing Maine's first-in-the-nation batch tracking functionality. If you did not receive that email, all the documents are also available on OCP's website. It's important that we keep things respectful. There's plenty of passion in this industry, which is why it's succeeding each day. But please keep comments and questions focused on the batch tracking program and respect each other. This meeting is being recorded. The video will be shared after the meeting on OCP's webpage. So please know that anything shared here will be public record, and any of your friends or colleagues or other interested individuals might want to watch this, you can direct them to our YouTube page. We'd like to try and use the hand raise feature on Zoom. If you can use the raised hand emoji in Zoom's reaction function, that'll help us to direct traffic. Alternatively, please use the Q&A function as well. OCP will be monitoring it, and or the physical raise your hand, or if that's failing, physically raise your hand on camera so we can see you and we can put you in the queue. Please keep yourself on mute if you're not talking. In this meeting, we'll begin conversations about batch tracking. We know that you'll have many questions and we'll do our best to answer them, but please remember that this is just the beginning of the conversation. And so let's jump into the nuts and bolts. Last year, the Maine Legislature passed LD 1817, instructing OCP to implement cultivation batch tracking through our inventory tracking vendor, Metrc. I'd like to provide an overview of what the batch tracking program is going to look like, and this presentation is going to be broken up into three parts. First, I'm going to provide a little context and go over some of the considerations that went into the negotiations around the batch tracking amendment. Next, I'll talk a bit about the structure of the program. And third, I'll talk a bit about costs. I'll also wrap up with some of the additional benefits included in the contract amendment. Want to advance, Lexi? So the realities of batch tracking are important to start off with. Batch tracking through this program is a first in the nation technology. The shift to batch tracking requires a software build out. That was a very important part of this contract negotiation. It's unfortunately taken more time than any of us, you especially, wanted it to take, but we finally gotten this across the finish line and through the process. Part of the slowdown also were some of the additional considerations that we were focused on, including maintaining the API to make sure that some of the third-party software that you all use will still be able to interface with the new system. We also recognize that there can be inherent benefits in batch tracking for larger producers relative to smaller producers, and we wanted to do our best to mute those differences and create as equitable of a system as possible across the board. Next, as I mentioned, this requires software build out, and software changes require money. The state of Maine is fully absorbing the costs of the technological build out. What we didn't want to do is pass along those costs to the industry, and certainly didn't want to pass along those costs to consumers either. Next, there are obviously budgetary and appropriations limitations to what technology could be developed. In an ideal world, we'd have an unlimited budget, but unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. And so we were working within our means while still trying to make sure that this was an equitable program for the industry. Next, Lex. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the additional considerations. Obviously, as cultivators and other members of industry, cost is central. We wanted to ensure that batch tracking would not increase the monthly user fees for using Metrc. I know this is a significant point of contention. There's been a lot of speculation about how costs would be distributed, what would happen to the monthly user fee. I personally was committed to making sure that the monthly user fee did not increase under the new batch tracking system. We also didn't want to increase costs related to tags either. And so what we did was we negotiated a revenue neutral system so that moving forward, you would not see dramatic changes to your costs relative to the use of the batch tracking system if you choose to implement that batch tracking system. Next, compliance is central for OCP. To make sure that the batch tracking system still allows us to maintain the integrity in the system that we're required to maintain under statute is absolutely essential. And the program that we negotiated ensures that. Next, accessibility is key. We took a data-driven approach to understanding what harvest batching looked like within the system. And what we found will probably not surprise a lot of you. Most harvest batches in the state of Maine are relatively small. We looked at the year 2022, but we also looked at the entirety of the program since its inception through January of this year. And what we found is that since its inception, the average harvest batch in the state of Maine in the AU program was 33 plants. The average harvest batch in 2022 was 36 plants. Over 80% of all harvest batches in the state were 50 plants or fewer, and over 93% of all harvest batches in the state of Maine since the inception of the program were 100 plants or fewer. This gave us good context to understand where the industry was operating from and where and how batch tracking would be important. It also informed us about the accessibility. What we didn't want to do was design a system that would only be reserved or only be effective for the state's largest operators, nor, of course, did we want to make a system that was reserved only for certain segments of the industry. What we wanted, as I said, was something accessible across the board that people could feel a need and a benefit from using. And we've done that with the negotiations that we have here. So the program that we have developed, we're calling Flexible Standardized Batch Tracking, or FSBT. I want to focus on this first point most centrally. This is the start of a conversation among OCP, industry, and the legislature. We have a starting point here, but what we built into the negotiations, what we built into the contract amendment was the ability, sorry, my phone is ringing. We built in an ability to have a feedback mechanism. I've heard from many of you about the frustrations, not just in the length of time that it took to get this negotiation finished, but there was a frustration among many of you that there was not a public input in that contract negotiation process. Unfortunately, state contract negotiations don't involve public input. But what we were able to do was negotiate a portion of the contract that allowed that public input immediately starting today, and that public input to continue moving forward so that system modifications could happen to make sure that this system is working as best as possible and as effectively as possible for the cultivators who choose to use batch tracking. That includes feedback pre-launch and post-launch of this program. FSBT, as I mentioned before, is revenue neutral for licensees. You're not going to be paying any more during batch tracking than you're paying with individual tracking, and that will continue. For licensees who choose to continue individual tracking, your costs won't change. For those of you who are using batch tracking in the future, your costs will be similar or the same as they were under individual tracking. It was important to me to make sure that FSBT did not advantage large cultivators. Since I've taken this job 3.5 months ago, I've heard from many of you in public hearings, in phone calls, in emails, and in person about the concern that exists in the industry of larger operators squeezing smaller operators out. This is a real concern that we have, not just in the cannabis space, but really in business across the United States. I've heard you, and I've gone back and I've listened to a lot of hearings from before I took over as director, and this is a common thread. There are benefits to batch tracking for larger operators, and so we tried to design a program and successfully designed a program that really didn't advantage certain parties over others. And finally, in this point, FSBT, Flexible Standardized Batch Tracking's launch date is planned for September 1st of 2023. It's important to note that software buildouts, particularly software buildouts from scratch that are first in the nation, take some time. In addition to that, we want to make sure that there's time for testing, to make sure that the API is maintained so that your third-party software is going to be compatible with the new system. What we don't want is to launch a program that ultimately fails and lets you down and lets us down as well. So let's talk about the starting point for flexible standardized batch tracking. We're going to start this conversation with 4 batch tag sizes that really reflect the smaller scale of harvest batches in the state of Maine. So the first 4 batch tags that we're going to start the conversation with is a 5-plant, a 10-plant, a 25-plant, and a 50-plant batch tag. As I noted before, if you choose to continue to use individual plant tagging, that will also be available to you as well. OCP, in consultation with licensees, however, can request additional batch tag sizes from Metrc in intervals of 5 plants at a time. This is, I think, the best part of the flexibility of this program. I personally, an OCP, is not stuck on or fixated on sticking to 5, 10, 25, and 50 plant batch tags. We are more than willing to work with industry to see what industry wants, to see what is going to work best for your businesses. If it means spreading out dozens of 5-plant interval batch tags, then we can do that if necessary. It's also important to recognize what the limitations are. As those batch tags get larger, those batch tags can benefit larger operators over smaller operators. But what we want to do is have as equitable of a system as possible, but most importantly, to hear the feedback from you. What else is exciting is that we can start that conversation today and moving forward, and the modifications and the requests of Metrc to provide different denomination batch tags do not have to wait until after the launch. We can put those requests in pre-launch and they can be honored. At the same time, 6 months after launch or a year after launch, we might find that some modifications need to happen to the system according to batch tag denominations, et cetera, and we can continue those changes over time. What else is exciting is that in order for those batch tags to be approved, we're not required to go back to the negotiating table. We don't have to negotiate another contract amendment, which, as you all know quite well, can take an extended period of time. This is a simple request to Metrc that in the contract they're required to honor. There's also other significant flexibility in the system. You can customize batch sizes or significant for varying sizes, and you can mix and match the types of batch tags that you use. One might work for you, but a combination of tags, depending on what's available, might be what works best for you as well. And so we're able to honor whatever combination or lack of combination cultivators choose to use. But once again, I want to reiterate that the 4 plants, the 4 batch sizes that we're starting with is not what we're locked into. As I noted, I didn't want to build a system that I personally thought was perfect without hearing from industry. And this is the opportunity to hear from industry. I'm sure I'm going to hear a lot from all of you on the call today, but I want to make sure that it is clear that this is an ongoing process via email, in meetings, and phone calls, or in whatever setting possible, to hear from you about the feedback that you have and really what you want to see out of this system. I'd like to go through a few examples of flexible standardized batch tracking versus individual plant tagging. But first, I want to focus on the cost. This is something that has been a real focus for a lot of people. It's important to note that the Metrc software system is funded through 3 buckets. The first bucket is the state appropriation, the state fee that is paid every month to Metrc. The second bucket is through the Metrc user fee. The third bucket is a per plant fee that exists within the system right now through the tagging system. All of that comes together to power the system, to make sure that the system is funded. Here, we lay out in a 2-part table what the existing program costs and what the FSBT program costs. What we end up doing is multiplying through the 45-cent price through the batch tag in order to come up with the price. So if you were individually tagging 5 plants previously, it would cost you $2.25 for those 5 tags. If you're using a 5-count batch tag now, that 5-count batch tag will cost you exactly the same. Now, I'm sure that some of you expected that batch tags would cost an individual 45-cent charge, and that would be it. So I want to talk a little bit about my thinking behind this type of cost system with batch tags. The system has to be paid for somehow. The state appropriations lock us in our ability to pay what we can pay as a state agency. So that really left a movement of 2 different types of costs in order to make this system go. We could have increased the monthly user fee significantly, or we could have changed the way in which plant tagging happened in order to fund this system. Had we increased the monthly user fee, this would have provided a benefit to larger growers. If we increase the user fee to $500 a month, $1,000 a month, $1,500 a month, obviously larger producers would have been it would have been much easier for them to absorb those costs than it would have been for smaller producers. So the most equitable way to go about the pricing structure in order to power and pay for this system would be to make sure that the canopy size of the vendor determined how much they were paying. And you do that through the tagging system. As I noted, we're locking in for the remainder of the contract, the $40 per month Metrc user monthly fee. And the plant tagging system will also be locked in the structure that we have here. So let's go through a couple of examples about what plant tagging might look like. On the left-hand side, we have 10 plants. So 10 individual plants with 10 tags at 45 cents a tag. It's obviously a $4.50 cost, and it would be the same with a single 10 plant batch tag. The difference, however, and it's something that I heard quite a bit as I went back and listened to the debate around LD 1817 in the previous legislature, there was a real concern about what the labor costs and staff costs were for individual tagging. I've been to a lot of cultivation facilities around the country. I was lucky enough to go to a cultivation facility here earlier in the week. And looking at large cultivation facilities, you really get an idea of just how much staff time is involved in individually tagging plants. Batch tagging, as you all know, and as you argued in the debate around LD 1817, batch tagging can really bring down the staff and labor costs. And that's where the savings is found here. While the program remains revenue neutral relative to individual tagging, the batch tagging program saves businesses through those staff and labor costs. And so if you estimated, for instance, on the conservative side, that it's about a minute per tag per plant, you can see the types of savings that accrue over time. If we look at 33 plant, a 33 plant harvest batch, which is the average since the inception of the program, you could do 33 individual tags as you're required to do now. That's a cost-intensive process. Under the current standard of the 4 batch tags, 5 plants, 10 plants, 25 plants, and 50, you could use a 25 plant tag, a 5 plant tag, and 3 individual tags. takes a little bit more time relative to a single tag, but the cost ends up exactly the same, and you save staff and labor time. In the next example, you use a 25 plant tag and a 10 plant tag. It accounts for a couple of extra plants than you actually need. It saves you more time than affixing 5 individual tags. The cost is slightly more, 90 cents more for the entire batch. And then when you look at the per plant fee, it only ends up increasing the fee by 3 cents per plant, which over the course of a harvest isn't all that bad. Next, Lexi. So let's look at a bit of a larger batch. We looked at 10 and we looked at 33. So let's look at 102. I'm not going to run through the individual tagging. We went through that. Here, the second column, you have 2 50 plant tags plus 2 individual tags, a total of 4 tags for a 102 plant harvest batch. Saves quite a bit of time relative to individually tagging 102 plants. The costs remain exactly the same. Or you could up it a little bit more and do the equivalent of 105 plants for a batch for 102 plants, 2 50 plant tags and a 5 plant tag. Increases the per plant cost by about a penny a plant. It saves significant amounts of time and labor costs, and ultimately the cost for the whole harvest batch increased by less than $2. We're not forcing cultivators into using the batch tagging system. We want the flexibility to make it work for them. And we also want that conversation to continue in the future so that if individuals see the need for more denominations of plant tags, we're able to deliver them and drive down those costs per plant as much as possible. And most importantly, drive down the staff time as much as possible. Next, Lex. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the additional goals now that I've laid out the flexible standardized batch tagging program. First, I've listened to the concerns and our staff has listened to the concerns from the Metrc user group work group. Those have been really helpful. We also had a Metrc user work group call in the first quarter of the year, and we're going to have another one likely in June to continue to hear what changes have happened in terms of Metrc's customer service. Metrc's customer service is pretty lousy. It has been. It's made some improvements, but it still is not what we want it to be. So we held Metrc's feet to the fire in the negotiations and really increased their the requirements around response and resolution times, as well as what they consider major tickets versus minor tickets. We made it clear to them throughout that the licensees were really unhappy with customer service, and customer service had to be part of the contract amendment. We wanted, as I mentioned before, access for small craft cultivators, as well as any member of the cultivation community in Maine's adult use program to have access to this system. And we think we found a way to ensure that access while making sure that that access is equitable. One of the real concerns that was, another real concern that was voiced in the debate around LD 1817, many of you talked about this, Representative Supika talked about this, was about the plastic waste in the number of tags. Certainly switching to the batch tracking program is going to dramatically reduce the amount of plastic waste by reducing the number of tags. We estimate by about 90 to 96%. We've also negotiated with Metrc around a sandbox environment, something that the Metrc user work group talked quite a bit about. For those of you who are not familiar with the sandbox environment, this is essentially a dummy version of Metrc that you can go into, play around with the system, play around with numbers without affecting your actual numbers in the system attached to your business. Metrc estimates that in the next few months, the sandbox environment will be available, and we are able to have those conversations about the cost of that and where the cost would be distributed once that becomes available. Also important, as I mentioned earlier, we preserve API functionality. I know that a lot of you use third-party software for a variety of business operations and business purposes. The ability of those third-party software those third-party software platforms to interface with Metrc is essential for the continued success and the continued operation of your business. And so this flexible standardized batch tracking through the standardization of 5 units at a time really allows that API to be maintained in an important way for all of you. So I'm going to stop there. I've talked quite a bit at you. I know this is a lot of information, both spoken at you, as well as a lot of information that has been provided through the materials that we circulated and have posted on our website. And I'm excited to hear from all of you, as I said now and moving forward, and to hear and to entertain any questions that you have. All right. Okay, I'm looking for hands raised or questions in the Q&A section. Welcome, Representative Sapika. If you guys would like to sort of sit on it, we can, have another session like this for Q&A after the information's been digested a bit. Feel free, obviously, to email our office and to reach out to us in any way with any of the questions or concerns that you all have. Anything coming in? And we'll also have a question form on the website that'll probably be up on Monday. It'll be along with the materials that we've posted related to the FSBT program, and so you can type into that applet, and it'll come right to us. All right.
I have a question.
Sure. Can I ask who this is, just so I can put a name to the question?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for letting me call in. This is Ben Samuelson. We're a cultivation and nursery called Seed and Soil. So yeah, my question, I'm sorry I jumped onto the call late, and I know that I should watch it, but I wanted to ask how a batch of plants needs to be delineated within the field in order to correspond with a single tag. Let's say 50 plants. How do I indicate that those 50 plants belong to that tag?
Sure, Ben, thanks a lot. So under the statute, a batch was defined as a similar cultivar, the same cultivar grown in the same space. So a batch would obviously have to be in the same room in a similar cultivar. Obviously, in talking to our compliance staff about this, this is something you guys want our compliance staff to be in and out as quickly as possible. And so arranging those plants as closely together and packed together as possible would be the most helpful. And so you would affix a tag or put a tag with that batch, and our compliance team would be able to go in, identify what it is, identify how many plants are able to be attached to it, and then count. There will obviously have to be some level of trust here that what you're lining up is going to match up with those batch tags, but we trust that you'll be able to do that. There will obviously be some growing processes with this, both on the side of licensees as well as on the side of our compliance team. But we're going to be working really hard to make sure that all makes sense.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's actually helpful because, obviously we keep, you can look at the field and know what belongs to what stake when we label a group of plants. So perfect.
Thanks for your question.
All right. You're welcome. I think I'll speak for everyone and say that, it's disappointing that the cost remains the same for the tags, but it is a help. This is a clear improvement. So thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Tracy, I assume you have a question that got emailed in, then I'll go to Justice and then Ryan.
Yes, I have two questions in the chat. The first is, how does destroying plants on multi-tag work?
How does destroying? I'm sorry, Tracy. I'm not sure if I heard you right.
Sure. The question is, how does destroying plants on multi-tag work?
I'm not sure. Okay, I'm going to have Vern take that question. I'm not sure I quite
Hey, am I off mute now? Technology, I love it. I think just to kind of recap, the question is, if you've tagged a bunch of plants under a batch tag, you've got X number of plants in there, and you need to destroy some of those plants, how will that work? That will be a feature that will be built into the system. It'll have that functionality to make those adjustments, just like you do now, except you'll make it under the batch as opposed to under an individual tag.
All right, next, Tracy. You said you had two?
Yep, the second question is there a cap on how many plants can be under one batch tag?
So the cap for the number of plants under a batch tag is the number that is on that tag. So 50 for a 50 plant batch tag, 50 would be the limit. You could have fewer than that if you want, and there will be functionality within the system to type in. If you had, let's say, 49 plants under a 50 plant batch tag, you can do that. Once you move above that, if you tried to type in 51 or 52, it would obviously kick it out as an error or not let you do that. And so that would allow you either to use an individual tag, or it would allow you to use additional batch tags, or, as I said before, through the conversations that we have, we want to make sure that this is a right-sized system. And so if we come across a sort of frequent issue, we can always ask for additional denominations of batch tags. Justice, you're up.
Hi, how are you, Director Sudak? Thank you for taking the time, and thank you to OCP for the hard work you've done on this. Again, I would have echoed Ben's sentiment that we would have liked to seen some direct cost savings off of the regime, and I would agree with you in that, you know, based on this new information, we should probably circle back, because we need to now take a look at your financial assertions and assumptions and see what they mean on the ground level to our business. And so we certainly wouldn't be prepared to comment today, but we'd love to welcome the opportunity to circle back on it.
Yeah, thanks, Justice. I appreciate it. Like I said, I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you all very quickly, and there's obviously written information. For those of you who haven't clicked through it yet, there's a sort of a short white paper. There's a one-page explainer. There's a lot of information to go through. As I've said in committee, and as I've said to many of you individually, I'm not a business owner. I don't own a cannabis business. And so I don't know what that will look like on the ground. And I think you all will have a good perspective about what you anticipate this program looking like. And then, of course, once the program launches in September, maybe you guys are completely right. Maybe there are some parts that you're off on. And as we're going through this, I definitely want this, and I mean this genuinely, I want this to be a continuing conversation. As you all know, once something gets going, sometimes that's when you learn where the weakest points are. And so, yeah, I welcome this continued conversation, Justice, and with all of you now in the coming weeks and months, and then obviously into the future after launch. All right, Tracy, there's a question in the Q&A about what email we should use to mail the questions in as they come in. Do you have a recommendation on that?
Yes, Lisa responded and said that because Monday is a state holiday, on Tuesday we will have a form on the website where you can submit questions.
Sorry, I did not see Lisa's response. Sorry about that. Anyone else? You'd think after over 3 years, I'd be better at Zoom than this. Tracy, one more?
Yes, one more in the chat that asks, will batch tags cost more than individual tags? I don't understand how the cost is staying the same.
So what we end up doing is, based on the denomination of the batch tag, we multiply that through times the cost of an individual tag. Lexi, could you pull up that pricing chart again? So if you have let's say a 50 plant batch tag, you would multiply 50 times 45 cents. And so you'd have a $22.25 batch tag for a 50 plant batch. That's the same as if you were individually tagging 45 plants at 45 cents. I'm sorry, 50 plants at 45 cents a piece. Did you catch a name on who asked that question, Tracy?
I believe so.
Well, in the meantime, as we add additional batch tags in 5-unit intervals, that cost structure will remain the same. It will be 45 cents times the denomination of that batch tag. So that's how the cost structure ends up staying the same relative to what individual plant tagging would be. Thanks, Lex. Matt.
Hey, Director Hudak. Thanks for getting this up and out for us. So I'm not sure this quite follows the intent of LD 1817. I mean, we should be able to keep as many plants as we want under one batch tag. And as you know, I'm one of the smaller cultivators, and this is actually going to increase my price on my biggest room. It's not going to be cheaper for tags. So
Can I ask Matt, can you just flesh that out a little bit, just so I understand it a bit more, how it would increase your cost?
Sure. So 270 plants times 45 right now is 120, 150.
Mm-hmm.
And so your largest batch tag only covers 50 plants, correct?
At present, but we can request ones of higher value.
You can. So will we be able to do that at launch? Like if I got one room with 270 plants in the same cultivar, am I going to be able to put it on the one batch tag?
Yeah, so we, as I had mentioned before, we can make these adjustments pre-launch and we can make these adjustments post-launch. And so it's conversations like these that I think really are helpful. Like I said, the 5, 10, 25, 50 was very much the starting point of the conversation. And maybe I should have been a little clearer about that. The starting point of the conversation, not the starting point of necessarily day one of the launch. And so understanding what the needs are within the system, among individual licensees, that's going to help us make those recommendations to Metrc, or sorry, I shouldn't say recommendations because they're not recommendations, make those requests to Metrc about the denominations that are going to fit well. Now, let's sort of strip that away, Matt. And let's say we did stick with 5, 10, 25, 50, which I'm not advocating for at all. But let's say we did stick with that. What you could do with 270 plants would be to put 5 50 plant tags down and then a 25 plant tag or 2 10 plant tags. Now, appreciate your point about it. The legislative intent could have been, might have been or was one tag for an entire, if you have the 270 same cultivar in the same space. My point is, in terms of the cost, you could price that out with the existing, even with the existing 4 plant tag system, and it be the same price as individual plant tagging. But again, I'm certainly not locked into those, and we can have that conversation about what's going to work best for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think what would work I'd humbly suggest that we'd be able to put as many plants as we want under a batch tag and not be, in 5, 10, 25 denominations. And, for me, batch tagging was 1 plant in that 1 tag in that room. And now it sounds like a compromise is 6 tags in that room. And I mean, it's like a $12 increase, on tags, which is not a big deal, but still. All right, as long as we're talking.
You brought up a good point about the sort of 5-unit intervals. We had that conversation with Metrc about the difference between sort of 1 tag and then an open field for entering the value versus the standardized system. And the reason we ended up with the standardized system is that there is a strong belief that the standardization is the key to making sure that the API is maintained. That 1 tag with an open field for the number that you can put in was likely going to break the API for certain third-party software vendors. And so this is what maintains that, which is obviously essential for a lot. It's not, I think, exactly what everyone wanted it to be, but I think this is a really good compromise position that keeps costs down and still allows the API to function and meet legislative expectations.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all the work. I know you guys have been grinding away at this, so thank you for this today, and I'm sure we'll be bouncing it off our people and seeing how they feel about it. So
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it, and thanks for joining.
have a good day.
Other questions? Tracy, did any come through?
Yes. Let me. I'm just reading through a few comments to try to find a question.
Sure.
Okay, here's one. So despite the savings in cost to Metrc, by virtue of producing less tags, the grower now carries the burden of the cost of the tags that are no longer necessary. The savings is in time and labor. The savings in time and labor is wonderful.
So that's a great question. So the 45 cents per tag is not the actual cost of the tag. What that 45 cents per tag does is it allows the distribution of the costs of the program to be spread across Metrc licensees or Maine licensees using Metrc in an equitable way, so that larger growers are paying for the larger canopy, smaller growers are paying for the smaller canopy. And so while I've heard the line used a lot that like Metrc is just a company that sells tags, the real cost, the cost behind that is actually powering and funding the system. And so what we wanted to do, as I had mentioned before, was to come up with this equitable solution. And so the system has to be paid for in some way. It was just, for me, a really bad idea to increase the user fee, the monthly user fee, to offset that cost, because that would really hit smaller producers a lot harder than it would hit larger producers. And so the best equitable way would be to continue to spread those costs out according to canopy size. And that's what this program does. Representative Boyer, good to see you. I acknowledged Representative Supika. I just saw you up there as well. I wanted to say hello. Tracy?
There was one other comment that was very similar to the last question. So I think we are all set on the chat questions.
Excellent, thank you. I want to be mindful of people's time on a Thursday late in the afternoon. And any of you joining the Augusta City Council meeting tonight will be there as well. So I doubt many of you will be there, but if you are, come say hi. Any other time for questions? Senator Hickman, good to see you as well. Everyone is spread out across 2 pages and I forgot to scroll over. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for participating. I don't see any more questions coming in. As I said, oh, does someone have a question? Oh, sorry, I thought I heard someone. It's a lot of information tossed at you at one time, like I've said a few times now. I'm really looking forward to you guys cozying up with it over the next couple of days. I know I'm thankful for the questions that you all had today. I know there's going to be a lot more questions moving forward, and we're really looking forward to hearing from them, engaging with them, learning from them, and ultimately responding to them. Before we all sign off, I'd like to remind you that this has been a public forum and that this will be available online after we close off today. Anyone, I'm sure that, you know, there's a hell of a lot more licensees in the program than there are on this call right now. People running businesses are busy people, and I know not everyone could take the time today. So please direct people to this, to the video, as you hear from them, as they ask you where they can see it. And the information provided to you once again via email today is also available on OCP's website. And on Tuesday, the OCP website will also have that function that you can send questions in through that. And the final reminder, like I said, this is the beginning of our conversation, and I'm really looking forward to continuing it with all of you. Have a good day and have a good long weekend for those of you who have Monday off.